Montreal Canadiens have made a change at general manager, much to the surprise of a lot of observers. We're joined by Laura Saba of Locked On Canadiens to talk about that and a lot more coming up on the Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, Gil Martin here. Thank you for joining us on the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. Thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Big changes coming in Montreal. The Canadiens letting go their general manager. We are joined now by Laura Saba, the co-host of Locked On Canadiens, to talk about it. And Laura, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a big weekend in Montreal, a little bit earlier than expected.
Yeah, I would assume. So fill in our listeners, what happened? Because I don't think anyone, look, your team went to the Stanley Cup final this past year. We know your starting goaltender has not played yet this year. I don't know, what was expected of this team that wasn't happening. So fill us in.
So I think what happened was it started right after the Stanley Cup final in the media availability and the season wrap-up press conferences that everyone was doing. Somebody asked Marc Bergevin about his contract status and whether talks had begun to renew it because it's up at the end of this season, or it was up at the end of this season. And he said something to the effect of, I will honor the remaining year in my contract, and then we'll see. And that had everybody talking. And he also said something before the Stanley Cup final was, they asked him, what would it mean to you as a person or to you in your career if the Canadiens were to win? This was before they even started facing Tampa. And he said, I could retire on this. So it seemed at that point, that the pressure of this market, the exhaustion of running a team like the Montreal Canadiens was kind of getting to him. And then you had the disastrous offseason where they picked Logan Mailloux in the draft, in the first round of the draft. And there was a lot of, I think they were not expecting backlash, which should have been the first clue, right? They were not expecting the backlash that they got. He was insistent on that pick and he defended the pick. And then there was some behind the scenes talk about how it wasn't Trevor Timmins' choice. Trevor Timmins also assistant general manager, head of, scouting and development. And he also got fired today along with Marc Bergevin and the head of PR, Patrick Wilson. All of this, I think it started from that disastrous offseason. And they did not handle that very well to the satisfaction of their fans, although, they were able to placate their sponsors. And then they allowed a lot of people to leave, such as Corey Perry, who they refused to give him a 2-year contract. They were willing to meet him on money, but they didn't want to give him 2 years. They only wanted to give him 1 year. So he went off to Tampa. That was a big loss. They knew that Shea Weber was playing injured throughout the Stanley Cup final. That was a big loss. They knew he's not coming back, right? It's all unofficial, but clearly he's not coming back. This man, he's very, 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 very injured, and he's got so much recuperating to do. And hopefully, at the very least, what we hope is that he's able to rehab so that he can have a good quality of life. But all of that writing was on the wall. And this was even before Carey Price was not going to start the season with the Montreal Canadiens. So you had a lot of leadership depart. They had Philippe Danault, who is a very, very good two-way center, Selke caliber two-way center also leaving. And part of that was there was some animosity, right? The Canadiens apparently leaked news of the contract negotiations early in the season when it wasn't going well. And so that kind of, I believe, made Philippe Danault kind of sour on the organization. And even through that amazing experience of going through the Stanley Cup final with him being so instrumental in that, he still ended up leaving. So there was, there was sort of cracks in the foundation. And what everybody assumed was, all right, Marc Bergevin has 1 year left. It's likely that he's not coming back. There's rumors about what his next position is going to be. There was talk about him going to LA and all of that. So everybody just assumed that at the end of this season, there would be a management change. But what happened was the Canadiens started the season abysmally. It is terrible. It is the worst first 23 game start in their 111-year history.
Wow.
That literally they have not had a record this bad through 23 games. So I think that was kind of, that was sort of becoming more and more evident that, Jeff Molson had to do something. People in the market would have been patient if it was an outright rebuild, but they refused to call it that. The team is in disarray on the ice. So obviously, and one of the things that is of note here is that the Canadiens never had a president and general manager, president of hockey operations position. It was Jeff Molson, who's the president, and then it was the general manager and who's in charge of hockey operations were both Marc Bergevin. So they didn't have that kind of the Toronto sort of leadership structure where there's Brendan Shanahan and then there's Kyle Dubas and they both do different things and Kyle Dubas answers to Brendan Shanahan, right? There's a plan in place. There's a clear hierarchy, clear leadership structure. There was none of that in Montreal. So a lot of the criticism of Jeff Molson was why won't you just hire a president of hockey operations, have Marc Bergevin be answerable to somebody, and have him do only the team management part of it. So this was a huge criticism, and Jeff Molson defended himself and his position in 2020. That obviously is no longer tenable. That is how you got to the rumors that they are about to hire Jeff Gorton. And I believe it is now official, and he's going to be joining the team on Tuesday or Wednesday. But in the meantime, obviously Jeff Molson changed his position, and at the same time, Marc Bergevin had talked about Scott Mellanby being his successor. That's who he had groomed to be his successor as general manager when he left. And see all that, like it was clear that he wanted to go, right? So I think it was just a matter of waiting. And so Scott Mellanby was in talks with Jeff Molson, and then Jeff Molson was like, well, I don't think he could be the general manager, but maybe the president of hockey operations. And then he was told that they're going in a different direction. And then they asked permission to speak to Jeff Gorton, and Mellanby resigned. And then I think the kicker is that he told people in the media at the start of Hockey Night in Canada on a Saturday night where the Canadiens were playing the Penguins, right? That was what kicked it all off, because if that hadn't come out at that point, then this weekend would probably have taken a few weeks. But not only did he resign, he told people. So then I don't think that Jeff Molson had much of a choice than to, let go or relieve of their duties Marc Bergevin, Trevor Timmins, and Patrick Wilson.
Okay, so can the Canadiens clean up the power structure of their front office? Does this just mean a new person is coming in, or will they actually reorganize the way this chain of command works?
It looks like they're reorganizing it. So what is of note is that Jeff Molson is still calling himself the president, and he's hiring Jeff Gorton as the vice president of hockey operations. So clearly he's having a little bit of trouble letting go on that front. And so, it remains to be seen. I feel like he has to, if he's going to make this hiring, he has to trust the person that he's putting in this position to make the right decisions. He picked this person for a reason. He's had success. He was an interim GM in Boston when they had one of their most successful drafts in history, right? He was instrumental in getting really good players to end up on the New York Rangers organization. They're the ones that came right out and said, all right, we're going to do a rebuild. And the fans bought it. They sold a rebuild. And to be honest, it was a huge shock when he got fired from New York last season. And so I think, and that, we can talk about the ownership in New York, but that's not what we're here to discuss. Right. So I think the person that he's put in the role of president or vice president of hockey operations is somebody who makes good decisions, is somebody who's got a good record, and is somebody who's not, he doesn't come with a whole lot of drama. He's quietly good at his job. So I think that's a really, really good positive for this market. And now it remains to be seen who they decide. But it's clear from the removal of Trevor Timmins that it is an organizational philosophy that they're trying to change. Because not only was he the head scout, then he became VP of player development. Now he's an assistant general manager. Like his stamp, his mark is all over this organization. He's had some home runs. Cole Caulfield, I think, is going to turn out to be one of them. Carey Price, his most obvious success in Montreal. Those are all Trevor Timmins picks in development. But at the same time, it's time for a change. I think that, the lack of consistent success in Montreal is pretty clear. They've had flashes of fun. We've had flashes of fun. They went to a couple conference finals. They went to the Stanley Cup final, but it's not sustained. I'd rather make the playoffs every year and then, lose in the second round or something like that, than not make it year over year over year and not have a future in mind or in on the horizon. So I think this means it's an overhaul.
Laura, this story is obviously going to continue to develop over time. Where can listeners find your podcast and find you on social media to keep up with this?
We are wherever you get your podcasts. You can find Locked On Canadiens with myself and my co-host Scott Matla. And we're on Twitter at LO_Canadiens.
All right, Laura Saba, thank you so much for joining us, and good luck to you and the Canadiens the rest of the way.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thank you, Laura. Great to have her here. It's such a crazy time right now for the Montreal Canadiens organization as they change general managers mid-season. Today's episode is brought to you by DirecTV Stream. Does this sound familiar? You've got one device that lets you catch the game live, another that lets you stream your favorite shows. You're watching sports highlights on your phone, and you've got your neighbors, best friends log in for the good stuff. Well, I want to tell you about a simple way to get all that entertainment you love without the hassle, and a great way to finally get your TV together. It's called DirecTV Stream, and it brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before. Watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes and no need to buy another device ever again. And the best part, there's no annual contract. So get rid of the clutter and the confusion and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package.